Howdy my totalies, always Tubular Gamers, we're back with, you guessed it, another video. Thanks for coming back to the channel, and if you're new here, maybe stick around for a while. I got a fun video for you. We're already halfway through 2024 somehow, and like every year, I've noticed that there have been a good amount of games that just haven't gotten a ton of attention. Obviously, there's been those massive blockbuster hits where they're selling like crazy, they reviewed super well, a ton of people are talking about them, they're just really prevalent. But what about those games that aren't getting a lot of attention, those games that are getting a bit overlooked? Well, that's what today's video is about. I'm going to tell you about the 10 most overlooked games of 2024 so far. These are the games that I just didn't see get a lot of attention, I didn't see a lot of people talking about them, they just kind of came and went. And obviously all of these are new games and they very well could blow up at a later date, but currently as I'm recording this video, I believe all 10 of these games are a bit underrated. Obviously I'm not saying these are the very best games of 2024, I already had a list where I talked about that. These are 10 games that I believe just didn't get enough attention that are actually worth playing. So as always, let me know down below how you're feeling. Let me know about some games you've played that I should have included here. Like, share, comment, subscribe. I got the Patreon and the super thanks. Any support truly is appreciated. Like, seriously, thank you. I don't have a team or other people helping me. It really is just me playing an ass ton of video games to talk to you about them. So let's kick it off. To start things off, I have the most recent game on the list, and that is Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble. Now, I love the Super Monkey Ball series. I played the shit out of the first two games on the GameCube, but unfortunately, everything after that has been pretty middling to bad. Like, even the remake of the first two games was just okay due to some questionable physics, and so with this being the first real new Monkey Ball game in a very long time, I was quite skeptical, but after playing all the way through it, I can tell you that yes, this is actually a good game. It's surprisingly good. I'd say it's even in the top 3 Monkey Ball games of all time. I'd much rather play this than Banana Blitz any day. The physics, the controls, the Monkey Ball feel, it's actually here. Sure, it's not as tight and precise as the first two games, but it actually feels good. The other thing is these levels were designed with these physics in mind, unlike the remake where it was new physics with old levels and it just didn't really gel all that well. Here, all of the levels were made for these controls, these physics, these monkeys, and the spin dash. I was really skeptical of the spin dash, but it's a decent enough addition, and you don't have to use it either. But if you want to do any kind of speed running or getting through these levels quickly, you're going to have to master the spin dash, and this game actually is incredibly replayable. It has some of the most replayable levels of any Monkey Ball game, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people that speed run it. And that's because, yeah, the levels are actually pretty decent here. Sure, some of them aren't the most memorable and are kind of basic, but there are plenty of good ones here, especially towards the end of the game where it can actually get somewhat challenging. There's a lot of good levels here. And yeah, they might not compare to the first two games, but I'm just happy we have good levels at all. This series has really been through the ringer, and I think it's thanks to that this game just hasn't gotten a ton of attention. I get it, Monkey Ball isn't overwhelmingly popular, especially when a majority of the series is bad. But this one, trust me, this one is different. Also, it's only on Nintendo Switch for some reason. I really don't know why it wasn't released on everything. I get the original two games were exclusive to GameCube for a time, but I think it would be in this game's best interest to be on as many platforms as possible. It would certainly help the performance, which isn't great, and this game doesn't even look amazing. It looks okay, like it has a nice stylized look, but it clearly looks a bit budget. The story's just kind of there, and the music is pretty forgettable, which is a disappointment, but all in all, I'd still say this is a good game not enough people are talking about. I'm sure when it's on sale, more people are going to check it out, and if you've ever been a fan of this series, I really can't recommend it enough. It's the first new, original, good Monkey Ball game in so long. Another game I'm pretty passionate about is the Alone in the Dark reboot. Now, I love this series. That original game and the new Nightmare are great. I even kind of like the shitty ones. But this is definitely not one of the shitty ones. This is one of the best games in the entire series, and not enough people gave this game credit, with the general consensus on it being, it's okay. But I think it's way better than okay. Sure, it's not as polished or tight or refined as, say, the Resident Evil remakes, but I think you still have a pretty solid survival horror game that, while it may be rough around the edges, still has a ton of charm and an excellent atmosphere. This game is basically a reimagining of that original Alone in the Dark, where you go out to this creepy house in the swamps, and then some real shit really goes down. You get to choose between two different playable characters, Edward Carnby and Emily Hartwood, and you will want to play through the game twice to get the full story experience. And I think this game is worth playing through twice, as it's a good survival horror game. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but Alone in the Dark basically created the wheel for survival horror games, so I wouldn't expect it to. And so what you have here is a rather traditional survival horror experience where you have a spooky house to explore. You'll explore around, you'll collect items, you'll solve plenty of puzzles, you'll get into some fights with some monsters, and there's some scares. The game has a generally tense atmosphere. In fact, the atmosphere is one of the best aspects to this game. Like, it's really good. It's not the scariest game you'll ever play, but I think it was decently scary, and it has its moments. And yeah, while it does have some rough edges, I think everything comes together pretty nice. The sense of exploration is decent, the puzzles are actually good. I actually enjoyed a majority of these puzzles, and the combat is serviceable. Yeah, the melee combat is pretty janky, and at times the combat in general is just kind of janky, but it's nothing awful. It's very functional, and it's decent enough. I think the presentation is decent here. It's got a nice little soundtrack. The voice acting is good. There's obviously some Hollywood actors here, and David Harbour is great. I mean, he's pretty much great in everything. And I think the pacing is pretty good throughout. It's not the longest game. Playing through this game twice will probably take you under 10 hours, but I think it's a good experience. It's also not a big budget AAA game. It was clearly made by a small, passionate team that unfortunately got shit canned real quick after this game came out. I'm guessing it sold like crap, and we're probably not going to get a sequel, which is a real shame because this game, it's a total hidden gem. And if you're looking for a well-made horror game, this very well might be the game to check out. It's not going to be the best survival horror game you've played. It's not even the best survival horror game in this video. But I really did like it for what it was. I think it has plenty of great moments to it, and I'm sure it's going to be dirt cheap sooner than later. And so once it's nice and cheap for you, go ahead and check it out. Another game I think you should check out once it gets cheap is Contra Operation Galuga. Now, the Contra series has also been just absolutely through the ringer with some of the best running gun games ever, and then some of the worst video games ever made. No hyperbole, no cap, no kizzy. Like, some of the Contra games are absolute horse shit, and I can totally see why so many people were skeptical of this game. I was too, but after playing through it, I'm here to tell you this is actually a good game. This is easily the best Contra game in the last 10 plus years, and if you like running gun games at all, I think you should check this one out. Konami sucks at a lot of things, but you know what they're really good at? They're really good at putting their games on sale very quickly, and so I'm sure this game is going to be relatively cheap sooner than later, and I think that's one of the reasons why people didn't check this one out, because $40 for a running gun game like this, yeah, that's a bit pricey. But hey, it's actually a good running gun. The controls and the feel are good. The game was developed by WayForward, who made Contra 4, and they absolutely understand what people want from a Contra game. Big guns where you just blow shit up. The level design is relatively straightforward and nothing special, but you get to just blow everything up, and it's actually a lot of fun. The entire game can be played through cooperatively. There's some good moments and set pieces. There's not a dull level here. And the game is constantly mixing things up with a good amount of variety and decent pacing. It's not the longest running gun game, taking around an hour to an hour and a half, but there's actually a lot of replayability here. There's a bunch of different characters, there's hidden challenges, and a lot of things to unlock. There's a good amount of fan service here. It's really nice to see. The game was clearly made by people who actually give a shit about this series. Konami might clearly not, but WayForward did a good job. It totally has its flaws. If you've never liked this series or this style of game, this game isn't going to change you. But if you're someone who grew up with Contra, or maybe you haven't played one of these kinds of games in a good while, this might be a game to check out. And so our next game is certainly not the most beloved game to come out this year, but it is Outcast: A New Beginning. This one has been kind of all over the place, but I fall onto the side of people that did enjoy this game for what it was. It absolutely has some rough edges, and it is a flawed game, but underneath all of those flaws, I think you still have a pretty enjoyable open world game. And I think people didn't give it the time of day for a variety of reasons. It didn't review the best. It's a sequel to a game that came out in the 90s, a somewhat niche game I might add. And like many other games on this list, the asking price was a bit high. But despite all of that, I still did enjoy my time with the game. I didn't love this game, and it's not one of the best games I've played this year. But I think this is one of those really solid 7 out of 10 hidden gems. It's janky, it's ambitious, it's got a lot going on, and I think the people that play it, most of them are going to like it. Like, yeah, it's not crazy polished, and I'd say the best comparison is probably to Elix 2, more than just Elix 2, all of Piranha Bytes games with their Eurojank, and rip Piranha Bytes, apparently they are also closed. Man, fucking Bracer, this company just fucking sucks. Seriously, what a piece of shit. They're just closing all the game studios that don't make them $1 bazillion. Anyway, back to Outcast: A New Beginning. It is a sequel to the original Outcast that came out in the 90s that was later remade, but you totally don't need to play it to understand this game. It can be played independently, and it sees our main character Cutter Slade being dropped onto this planet with amnesia and being told to pretty much just somehow save them, and that's all I'm gonna say. I think the story is actually good here. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of world and character building, and while not all of it is great, I did enjoy most of it. The writing and the dialogue are kind of all over the place. Sometimes it's good and funny, other times it's kind of MCU cringe, but I liked it for the most part. And when it comes to the gameplay, it is a very traditional open world RPG where you're in a pretty small open world that is very vertical, and while it doesn't bring the freshest or newest ideas to an open world game, I still like the general gameplay loop. You get a jetpack pretty early on, and flying around with the jetpack is a lot of fun in this game. It's the most fun I've had with this entire game. It kind of props the entire game up. The movement is really great in this game. You'll get into plenty of gunfights, clear out some enemy bases, you'll do quests for characters. A lot of them feel like side quests. The quests are just kind of all over the place, and it can get a bit repetitive at times, but I think the open world is decent enough. The combat is serviceable. The RPG elements, while light, are decent enough, and again, the movement really does prop this game up. The presentation is actually pretty good. It's got a few nice tunes, nice atmosphere, and while I don't think people are going to be praising this game to high hell, I think it's a game that should be checked out when it's a bit cheaper, and if you're okay with a little bit of jankiness. If you like any of Piranha Bytes games, this is the next best thing, and I guess it's going to be the only thing since Piranha Bytes is going away. Man, fuck this company. So our next game is Wrath Aeon of Ruin. Now, Wrath has actually been in early access for several years, and I remember when that early access build came out, there was a decent amount of attention on this game, but then nothing. Basically no updates for many years, and then the game just kind of comes out. But the final game is actually quite good. This is a very competent, good boomer shooter that really understands what makes a good boomer shooter. It runs on the Quake engine, which is rather impressive, and for a Quake engine game, I think it looks good. It's also rather ambitious with its level design. This game has 15 levels, and these are some of the biggest levels in any boomer shooter. Each one of them took me around an hour or a little more to finish. But what's great is that these aren't crazy complex like, say, Hexen or Heretic. They're actually really good at funneling the player and being relatively straightforward. Seriously, the level design deserves some major praise here. I think it's good. But then when it comes to actually being a first-person shooter, oh, it's great. The guns feel great. There's a ton of different weapons in this game. They're all very different, have different purposes, and again, they just feel real nice. Some of the weapons just feel great. They sound great. They got a nice impact. You'll kill plenty of things in this game. There's a good roster of enemies here, but these levels have just a shit ton of enemies, with some of them having over 1,000 enemies in the level. Outside of Serious Sam, how many FPS games can say that? Yeah, you'll do a lot of killing in this game, and so it's a good thing that the killing is good. Like, I love how the weapons feel. I had fun fighting the enemies. Exploring these levels is good. It's all good stuff. It does have a few flaws. Not all of the levels are great. Some of them are clearly better than others, and the whole saving system with it being a consumable is just kind of stupid. And then the music is just absolutely awful. Like, I have no idea what they were going for here, but they just totally dropped the ball with the music, which is a real shame because a lot of great FPS games that are like this have, you know, fantastic soundtracks. Quake 1 and 2, even recent boomer shooters have great soundtracks. So it's a shame that the soundtrack sucks in this game, but I can overlook all of that because the core gameplay really just is that good. If you like boomer shooters, this is not one you want to miss. I have no idea why I haven't seen just a ton of attention on it by like the FPS or boomer shooter community. I mean, I've seen a little bit, but I feel like it deserves more. If you like old school FPS games, it doesn't get much more old school than this. And so here's a game I just really wanted to talk about, and that game is Nightmare Kart. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this game, I couldn't blame you. It's a free download for PC only that is a Bloodborne-inspired kart racer. Originally, it was called Bloodborne Kart, and it was very obviously Bloodborne, but Sony asked the sole developer to not make it based off Bloodborne, so that's why it's called Nightmare, but it's very clearly still inspired by Bloodborne. There's a ton of fan service and love towards Bloodborne, and if you're a fan of the game Bloodborne, I think you're gonna like this. Even if you don't really like kart racers, I think you can still appreciate this game. Again, it was made by one person, and then it's actually a half-decent kart racer. The physics and the controls are fine enough. They're not amazing, but it works. There's a decent sense of speed. There's a good amount of tracks here. A few different gameplay modes. There's even a story and boss battles. There's even voice acting. including some from fellow YouTuber Sphere Hunter. That's pretty cool. Again, this isn't a kart racer that's going to make you go wowie zowie, I can't believe I've never played this, but this is very much one of those games where it was made by a fan for fans. Like, people who like Bloodborne, appreciate the lore and the story. Oh, I think you're going to get a lot out of it. I love the presentation, the music ain't bad, and while it's not super long, you gotta also remember it's literally a free download. I doubt this is ever going to come to any other platform, but if you like Bloodborne and you have a PC, well, you aren't going to be playing Bloodborne, but you can play Nightmare Kart. So with our next game, I was a little hesitant to add it, but at the end of the day, I decided to go with it, and that is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This was the first big release of the year, and while it got a decent amount of attention when it came out, I feel like all conversation about it has pretty much died out. Like, even with updates and an upcoming DLC, I feel like I have barely heard anybody talk about this game in the last 5 months, and I'm sure a few months from now, it's going to be pretty much a hidden gem. Apparently, it didn't sell crazy well, and I gotta say, that sucks, because this is one of the best games Ubisoft has put out in a long time. Most of the time, Ubisoft puts out mid-game after mid-game to bad, but then they'll go and drop a nice little diamond for us, and that's what this game is, a total diamond. A lot of people were not ready to like this game the moment it was announced. They went, oh, it's a 2D game, I want a 3D Prince of Persia game, why aren't they doing it in 3D, this sucks, I'm not checking it out. Well, here's a news flash for you, there's plenty of good 2D games. Prince of Persia started in 2D, and call this one a hot take, this game is basically better than any other Prince of Persia game. It's a Metroidvania, which is new for the series, and it doesn't see you playing as the Prince of Persia. You play as Sargon, basically one of the guards, and you have to go rescue the prince. And while the story and the writing isn't phenomenal, the gameplay absolutely makes up for it. The game feels great, the controls are excellent, the moveset is great, the combat is superb. Like, you can do some really crazy, cool looking shit in this game. It really is a character action game on a 2D plane. The combat was really impressive. The level design is great. There's a bunch of cool features not in most Metroidvanias, like how you can take a snapshot of an area and then you can view it whenever you want so you don't forget about it. This should be in every Metroidvania. The level design was great. I haven't played a ton of Metroidvanias, but this is one of the best Metroidvanias of them all. The presentation's solid. There's a bunch of cool set pieces and boss fights. You get some really cool abilities. The sense of exploration is great. This is just a swell game through and through. So to ignore it or say it sucks because it's not a 3D game, my response is you clearly didn't play the game, because this is actually a really good game. It's one of the best Prince of Persia games, and even people who don't traditionally like Ubisoft games can like this game. It is way better than it has any right to be, and I hope we get a sequel in the future. I hope this is the direction Prince of Persia actually takes. I think this is great. Oh, and it's Ubisoft, so it'll be like $10 by Black Friday. By then you'll have no excuse. And so here's the other survival horror game on the list, and that is Crow Country. Now, I've seen a decent amount of attention given to this one, and have actually been seeing a good amount of people talking about it, but I'm still gonna gas this up because this is one of the best new survival horror games I have played in quite some time. Yes, there are plenty of other survival horror games that have come out in recent years that are better than this, but most of them have been remakes or reimaginings or retellings. This is a completely new, original survival horror game that I thoroughly enjoyed from start to finish. The first thing you'll probably notice is how the game looks. I love the art style, I love the presentation and aesthetic. It very much is a throwback to older Silent Hill, older Resident Evil, really horror games of the 90s, and it looks great. Obviously it looks a bit more cleaned up and nicer than any of those old 90s games, but I really just love how this game looks, and the soundtrack is incredible, man. The soundtrack is so good in this game, and when it comes to the gameplay, oh, it's got that good shit. If you're someone who loves core survival horror gameplay, oh, this game has the fundamentals where you would get to explore this really spooky theme park known as Crow Country. You're looking for the owner, and something has clearly gone wrong here, and the story, the mystery is actually really good. I love the characters, the writing is good, the main character is interesting and funny, the twists are good. It's a compelling story through and through. But yeah, you get to explore this spooky theme park. I think the level design is really good. There's a good sense of exploration. There's plenty of puzzles to solve. The puzzles are actually good in this game. There's a lot of items to collect. There's a bunch of secrets. Seriously, there's a ton of secrets. And then of course you get attacked by monsters. The combat is probably the weakest part of this game, but it's not bad. It's just a little clunky. Granted, old survival horror games were also quite clunky. Something cool about this game though is it doesn't have a fixed camera angle. You actually get to move the camera in a 360 motion, and I think that's really awesome. There's even a bunch of secrets and puzzles that utilize moving the camera around where stuff is hidden unless you turn the camera a certain way. And I think this is pretty cool. You'll really want to explore every inch of this environment. You want to learn about the park and the people here and what happened. You'll get into fights with some crazy monsters. There's even a few bosses. There's some good set pieces. The pacing is solid, and then the game is crazy replayable. It's not super long, around 5 to 8 hours, but you can replay it several times, get all the secrets, enjoy everything. I like this game. It's right now my favorite horror game of the year. I even like it more than Alone in the Dark. I don't think it's a total hidden gem, but it is a game definitely worth playing. So from one indie game to the next, we have Arzette, the Jewel of Faramore. Now, I had never even heard of this game like 8 months ago, but once I saw it, I knew I had to play it immediately. The premise of this game is so wild. It is a spiritual successor to the Zelda CDI games. Yeah, you know the ones with the YouTube poops, the ones that people made fun of for like 20 years and are considered some of the worst games of all time. Yeah, a spiritual successor to those, only it's good. Quite good, in fact. It's a really solid Metroidvania. Sure, it's not as big and expansive as Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, but it was a very enjoyable experience. I might like this game a little too much, but I was just smiling ear to ear pretty much my entire playthrough. The first thing I gotta mention is the presentation and the cutscenes. I love how this game looks, and when it comes to the cutscenes, they absolutely understood the assignment. The cutscenes are wild. They are as cheesy and stupid looking as any of those old Zelda CDI games. There's already YouTube poops of these cutscenes, and there'll be plenty more for years to come. I'm someone who grew up with the YouTube poop videos, so this really does resonate with me. If you didn't, you probably are going to look at this and just be like, what the fuck is even happening? But I think even if you don't like YTP, I think you can appreciate just how goofy and silly the cutscenes are. They reference plenty of other games, especially Zelda, and make a lot of fun of it. But above all else, it was just entertaining. And then I really like how the game looks. It has a nice art style, and the soundtrack is great. The soundtrack is like stupidly good. I cannot believe how good the soundtrack actually is. When it comes to actually playing the game, it is a mix of the Zelda CDI games and a Metroidvania, where you get to explore some levels, you'll collect items, you'll get new power-ups, solve puzzles, and go back to earlier areas with those new abilities and solve new puzzles until you eventually fight some bosses, get to the end of the game, and that's it. There's some basic combat, decent platforming, alright level design, and there's even some side quests you can do here, but it all comes together in a way that I just really enjoyed. It's got a good pace throughout, and while the game isn't super long, you could probably finish it in a few hours, I think it is rather replayable. It has plenty of secrets and shortcuts, and doing the side missions are actually really worth it. I think this game is one of the most entertaining experiences I've had all year. It's not one of the very best experiences, but man, I really did like my time with it. I don't think this game got a ton of attention just because of how absurd the general premise is. I mean, most people probably don't even know about the Zelda CDI games at this point, so to make a spiritual successor to it, yeah, I don't think it's going to sell all that well. This is one of those indie hidden gems that not many people are going to know about, but if you know about this game, oh, you know about this game. You're in like that small little club that appreciates what this game is, and I'm here too. Say hi and encourage others to play Arzette. It's way better than you would think. Like, it's so much better than those Zelda CDI games, it's not even funny. There is no joke, there is no laughter, there is no meme. This is just a good game. You can't tell, but I've got a dead fucking serious look on my face right now. I really do. It's a good one. And so the last game today that I'm going to talk about is Sandland. Now, Sandland came out a few months ago, and I pretty much knew immediately it was going to be one of those games that was just going to kind of get overlooked. And that's for a variety of reasons. When it came out, it didn't review crazy well. They wanted, full price for it. And Sandland isn't exactly the most well-known anime or manga. I mean, Sandland's really kind of making a resurgence now, but if you had asked me even a few years ago what Sandland is, I wouldn't know what to tell you. So Sandland was actually developed by Akira Toriyama, the Dragon Ball, Dragon Quest guy that recently passed away, and I guess this was one of his final works. And it's kind of like anime Mad Max meets Dragon Quest, I guess, where there's demons and humans living alike in a post-apocalyptic world. Known as Sandland, it's a giant desert and it stars Beelzebub, the Demon King's son, and he's looking for water with a human, and there's a lot more to this story than that. That's all I will say. The story takes a lot of interesting twists and turns that I totally did not expect. The story and the characters and the writing are one of the best aspects to this game. It really is what kept me going. That and the vehicular combat is actually pretty decent. The presentation is nice also. This is a good looking game with a nice stylized look. The frame rate was smooth. I like how this game looks. The music was pretty generic though. When it comes to the core gameplay, it is an open world action RPG with a lot of vehicular combat. When you're on foot, it's a very basic action RPG, but a majority of the game, you really aren't. When it comes to the vehicular movement and combat, this is where the game excels. It actually feels nice. I think the vehicular combat is good. You get a tank, you get a hovercraft, and a few other vehicles, and they all feel very different from each other. I like how all the vehicles feel in this game. They all bring something different to the table, and the combat in general is decently entertaining. It's not the most complex, and it actually is rather simple for the most part, but I liked it. There's plenty of set pieces and moments in boss fights that are also cool. And the open world is pretty decent. I'm not going to act like it's an amazing open world. It's got a good size to it, but there's just not a lot going on here. The side quests are pretty forgettable and just kind of there, but you can totally do them. If you stick to just the main story though, you're looking at about 20 hours with decent enough pacing and plenty of good moments. I'm not going to act like this game sets a new bar for anime games. It does have some flaws. The stealth sections are pretty horrible. It can get a bit repetitive, and the open world activities, like I already mentioned, aren't stellar, but I still enjoyed the game, and if you're a fan of Sandland at all, this is totally worth playing. If you like anime games, sure enough, and like pretty much every other game on this list, I don't think it's sold all that well, and it's going to be real cheap real fast. Seriously, like all of the games I've talked about today are going to get so cheap within the next 6 to 12 months, and by then, you really got no excuse. But that's it for today's video. Hopefully I introduced you to at least one new game that you might check out in the future. That's the goal of this video. I hope it was what you were looking for, and I hope you all have a good Christmas. So if you made it to this part of the video, comment Christmas, because we're almost to Christmas, folks. We're only 6 months away, but we're almost there, and I'll see you all next time.